my final year in the classroom was absolutely bonkers because I was still one-to-one tutoring myself. I think the company had 35 staff. I think we had 120 lessons a week, and I was doing the rapping. And I've got a family. I've got a family of 3, so wife and 3 kids. So I'm busy. So when it came to the final year, I was like, I've got to quit the classroom. And now I just simply focus on 2 things: running the company JGM Science Tutors and the rapping, and that has my hands very full because we're at 300 lessons a week now. And the content, I'm trying to make videos once a week, so it's both are full-time jobs in themselves.
So you've got 3 full-time jobs.
Yeah, family, JGM, and the rapping. Yeah,
and the rapping. I won't ask you to pick which one is your priority.
We remember lyrics. We remember song lyrics. We like the song. We don't go out of our way. We don't sit there and go, right, I've decided I love this song. What I must now do is spend 20 minutes memorizing the lyrics. You like the song, you listen to it on repeat, and next thing you know, you're in the club and every lyric's coming out your mouth. And that's the logic with this when I write these. Everyone's got their own unique ways of doing things. And they do it in that way. Then the passion comes out and lessons work well. And that's how I've run things for 5 years. And our reviews stay at 5 stars and our bookings only go up. So that's what I choose to see as my evidence of that strategy working. So I keep it that way. And then I'm going to be re-putting all my songs onto owned music. So it'll all be mine. It will all be on Spotify and it can all be streamed on those platforms, because the number one thing students want to be able to do is not just necessarily watch it on TikTok. They got their exam, they just download Matt Green's Science album, headphones in on the bus on the way to school, and they're just listening to it.
Hello and welcome to the Qualified Tutor Podcast, the podcast that brings you the latest in the world of tutoring, edtech and education, and hopefully inspires in you the big change that each and every one of us is capable of. Qualified Tutor is an industry-leading tutor training organisation and online tutoring community for thousands of tutors around the world. This podcast is the voice of this community, where we aim to hear from tutors, teachers, entrepreneurs, coaches, business experts, students, tutorpreneurs, and more from the world of tutoring about what inspires them every day, how they can help tutors like you, and what they've learnt about tutoring along the way. The question is, what will you learn today? Hello and welcome, dear listeners, to the 134th episode of the Qualified Tutor Podcast. My name is Ludo Miller, the host of this podcast. Welcome back to regular listeners. Welcome to any of you for whom this is your first time listening to the Qualified Tutor Podcast. It's great to have you here. And of course, a huge welcome to our guest today, Matt Green. Matt, welcome to the podcast.
Thanks for having me, Ludo.
It's a real pleasure to have you here. And as I was mentioning to you just before, myself and my team here at Qualified Tutor have been following you, Matt, for a very long time. We've been sharing your videos, have been, diving into the kind of content that you publish on TikTok and on YouTube and that kind of thing. And for those of you who don't know what I'm talking about yet, listening in, we will explore that over the next 25 minutes or so. But for those of you who do know Matt Green, you'll know the rapping science teacher as well. It's brilliant. I don't think we've ever had a TikTok star on this podcast. It's something I've been meaning to bring on for a long time. So thank you for being the first, Matt.
No problem. I don't know if I refer to myself as a TikTok star yet, but it's nice to hear.
No, absolutely. So for those of you who don't know Matt, or maybe who do know Matt, but you don't know too much about his background, Matt graduated with an MSc in neuroscience from Imperial in London, and then went on to teach chemistry for about 10 years, and moved on to the role of head of chemistry in several schools as well, which was a great step up. And then from there, Matt founded JGM Science, which is an excellent tutoring organisation of made up of qualified teachers offering kind of KS3, GCSE, A-level science tuition, that kind of thing. And for our international listeners, that's students from the ages of around 10 to 18. And then not long after JGM Science Tutors was founded, the lockdown hit, and Matt decided to turn to social media and to TikTok and YouTube to disseminate his brilliant little tidbits and short videos on chemistry, biology, physics, that kind of thing. Just giving students and parents a really good, quick way of acquiring that knowledge. And that is the rapping science teacher. So you may have. I feel like that first video was just such an explosion on the internet, Matt. It was. I remember watching that very first video you did. And nowadays you have, what is it? I think it's 260,000 followers on TikTok and over 3 million likes. So that is just enormous.
Thank you. Yeah, it took off. It took off more than I expected to, I think. But yeah, I'm gonna be sticking with it for a long while.
Yeah, absolutely. Now, you help students every single day. You help teachers every single day as well. I'm sure many teachers probably a little bit underhand and secretly watch your videos as well. It's not just students and parents. But
that's right.
Regular listeners of this podcast will know that we like to take our guests back to the very beginning at the start of these episodes, and right back to their school days. Now, Matt, as with a few other guests, I gather actually locating school reports was perhaps too tricky a task. But you do have a story from those school days, I gather. Is that right?
Yeah, I tried looking for some reports, and I wish I could find some, because I do remember having them at some point. But the only thing that sprung to mind that was quite funny was when I had a detention. I was given a detention from a PE teacher, and I remember it being unjust at the time. But I suppose we think everything's unjust as a child, but I think this one was. And I think I just walked out of school, walked home, got in a bit of trouble for this. And then my mum, who backed me, she wrote a letter explaining in elegant detail. She was an English teacher herself, and she's a very strong writer, about why I wouldn't be attending this detention. And I wish I could show you, because whenever I show my friends or anyone, her wit is just too much. And essentially the school teachers just had to read it and write off that detention. And yeah, I don't think I ended up going in the end, but it's one of those things that you have to read. And I'm sorry I couldn't bring it today.
I wonder who learned the lesson there that day. Your mum, you, the teacher? I'm not quite sure who learned.
I think everyone but my mum.
Everyone but your mum. Yeah. That's excellent. I wonder if you ever received one of those as a teacher yourself, Matt. Did you?
I didn't, and I probably should have to get my comeuppance, but no. Most students showed up to my detentions.
So there was a bit of a rebellious attitude, maybe, as a school kid. I wonder. I mean, you've obviously since gone on to become an educator, both a teacher and a tutor. And I'm sure over the years you've thought a lot about why you have chosen down that path, or perhaps you haven't thought about it at all, and this will be your first time ever. But we love asking guests about their why. And we'd love to know, Matt, what do you think your why is as a tutor?
So for me, in the education space, getting into education and teaching, it was always about trying to help young people understand things in a way that would be sort of helpful, and in a way that would build their confidence and take them from not knowing something, feeling unconfident on it, and getting it and feeling like a sense of satisfaction from that and improving themselves. So that was my role in the classroom, from then tutoring myself one-on-one, and then obviously growing to have people that I employ and an agency. The idea is still the same. The students are out there that find the subject of science tricky. And for me, science is such an important subject because it's all about working things out. It's all about the world around us. You know, things can't progress forwards in society if we don't have strong scientists. And I consider myself having a small role in helping the youth get and grasp the subject very often when they don't. And the rapping thing was born out of that, and still fits into the same ideals of, you know, there are millions of students out there that might like science a little bit or might hate it, but the idea is, oh gosh, respiration, I don't get what that is. It's a word, it's got something to do with breathing, I don't understand. And it's for me to take that subject, break it down as simply as I can, so they can go, oh, I get that now. Not only do I get that, I understand all the explanations he just gave, and it happens to be in a song, and I can just memorize those lyrics. So when I'm writing songs, I'm sorry, my camera keeps thrusting me into darkness. I don't know why. When I write these songs, it's always about a student being able to listen and really, really understand it. I spend far longer on these songs than I ever did on my own lessons, which is why is why that. Well, I'd like to say they make sense in such a short space of time. It's because
which is why you've left the classroom, Matt. Is that what you?
Yeah. That's it. My final year in the classroom was absolutely bonkers because I was still one-to-one tutoring myself. I think the company had 35 staff. I think we had 120 lessons a week, and I was doing the rapping. So it was one-to-one tutoring myself, running the company, the rapping. And I've got a family. I've got a family of 3. So, wife and 3 kids. So I'm busy. So when it came to the final year, I was like, I've got to quit the classroom. And now I just simply focus on 2 things: running the company, JGM Science Tutors, and the rapping. And that has my hands very full because we're at 300 lessons a week now. And the content, I'm trying to make videos once a week. So it's both are full-time jobs in themselves.
So you've got 3 full-time jobs.
Yeah, family, JGM, and the rapping. Yeah,
and the rapping. I won't ask you to pick which one is your priority, but Matt, could you tell us a little bit more? I mean, you mentioned there that the rapping came out of that and wanting to be able to help students with real kind of points of obstacle points, we kind of call them sometimes. There's those moments where a student just can't get to that next stage of learning, and as you say, in science that's huge, isn't it? Because we can't progress without understanding the previous stage. But could you tell us a bit more about why the rapping and why the kind of short form video format?
So in a simplistic answer, the whole social media scape is about short form content now. Years ago, it would have been TV shows and then eventually YouTube. But with the age of Instagram and TikToks, as well as YouTube Shorts, it's about extremely short form video content. And it's got to capture kids' attention. It's either you capture attention or they scroll on. And if you're a student, if I view myself as 13, 14, 15 years old, in this day and age, if I was on TikTok watching nonsense, watching people fall over, or comedy, or this, that, the other, if there could be something educational in there that would be useful to me at that time, that would help me. And that's the idea for these kids. They might be enjoying themselves on TikTok scrolling, not necessarily doing anything helpful for them, but they're enjoying themselves. They try to get out of school, whatever it is, and they see something and they can learn from it and be entertained at the same time, and as well be sparked into that subject that they previously thought was boring. And that's the whole point. It's very short, attention-grabbing stuff that can help teach them something, remember it, and get them engaged in the subject. For me, if someone was doing this 20 years ago when I was in school, it would have been history. If there was a TikTok equivalent and there was a rapping history teacher and he could capture my attention, I would understand it and remember it. Then, I would have gone from hating history and thinking it's the most boring thing ever to maybe loving the subject. And that's the idea here.
Yeah, and it's achieved massive success. So that those initial, the way you were thinking about that, the ideas you had have proven kind of correct to some degree, haven't they? Because it has caught on massively. And you don't, I remember thinking in the early days of QT that, that we wanted to do a little bit like short form stuff, tutor a topic in 20 seconds or something. I think that was one of the ideas we kind of came up with. And what you're saying there is exactly that, is capturing the attention and catching students where they are, which is probably scrolling on something. But you must have a background in music, or at least in some sort of, lyrical talent sense, because, to write that kind of stuff is obviously not easy. And you've spoken before about the kind of connection between music and learning, and we've had guests on this podcast before who've spoken about that. Could you tell us a little bit more then about that connection between music and learning, and why you chose music as a route to go down for that vehicle for learning?
So for me, years ago, I've always loved rap, and years ago I used to write rhymes and write raps. I think when I was 16, 17, 18. And then when I went to uni, I stopped. I never did anything proper with it. I didn't release it or do anything, just wrote it, used to record it in my bedroom. And I must have got proficient enough about it. I mean, I had flow, I could write things fairly quickly. And then 2 years ago, when I thought, how can I do something on social media that helps these kids, grips their attention and teach them something. Because I was already doing Instagram square fact of the day or a simplistic explainer. That was getting some traction. Students were liking those, but I thought I can do better. And I thought, could I bring out the old rep gloves and sort of match these two things together? And the logic behind it being, as you said, some guests in the past might have said, we remember lyrics. We remember song lyrics. We like the song. We don't go out of our way. We don't sit there and go, right, I've decided I love this song. What I must now do is spend 20 minutes memorizing the lyrics. You like the song, you listen to it on repeat, and next thing you know, you're in the club and every lyric's coming out of your mouth. And that's the logic with this. When I write these, I spend an inordinate amount of time on them because the logic is they have to have some rhythm. They have to be to a catchy beat that students already know. So there is no effort to liking them and no effort to wanting to learn them. By all means, not every student's going to love what I do. It's impossible to change that. But some students that like Dave, that like Stormzy, that like Central C, love those beats. If I can rap in some sort of way that's similar to them, with a flow, with a rhythm that they like, then it's automatic. You don't have to go, oh, gosh, I hate science, but let me laboriously sit and force myself to listen to this. If that's the case, it's not going to work. It's got to be like, oh, I like Central C's new track, Doja. Hey, what's this? This guy's rapping. Is this guy rapping about science? And it's the heart. And that makes sense. That's the logic by which it's supposed to work. It's just you already like that song. You're not listening to someone embarrassingly rap over it. Maybe someone thinks I'm embarrassing out there, but hey, what can I do? But the rest listen to it and think, that guy's got flow. That's heavy hitting. I like that. And actually, with what I'm seeing on the screen, I actually understand that because it's possible to write things in such a way that they're catchy and that they sound good. But actually, if you looked at what's going on the screen, you could be like, I can memorize this, and I actually like how it sounds, but I don't actually know what's going on. So it's about getting them all together. And the latest one that's gone viral about the heart, I think it makes sense. It's one hell of a beat from Central C, who's a marketing genius with the way he marketed that track, and he got a killer beat. Got the heart, which very often is very, very, very difficult to understand. Most students come out of class, they don't have a clue what's going on, and I try to as cleverly explain it as I could. Left side does this, right side does this. This is called this. Every keyword hits on a rhyming word, and that seems to have resonated. And it got to 2 million quite quick, and I thought it was going to stop at 3, but it seems to get another 300,000 views in the last 24 hours. So it seems to just keep me moving.
And that's because it comes from the heart. Excuse the pun.
Yeah.
It comes from the heart. I think that was the first thing that struck me. I don't study science anymore, and I'm annoyed that I don't, because if I did, then I probably wouldn't be going to my chemistry and physics classes. I'd probably just be getting it all from the rapping science teacher. But the passion that you can see just in your eyes and just in your face when you're doing those, and the kind of enjoyment that you clearly are taking from that is almost as infectious as the learning, the actual definitions of words and the processes, that kind of thing. And I think, I'm not here to second guess why your success has happened, but I feel like that's a huge part of it. Do you, obviously do you still tutor students yourself?
I still have a few students I tutor myself. So I think up till 2 years ago, I used to teach something like 24 students a week myself when I started going part-time in work. But then I made a decision a year ago to completely quit myself because it wasn't possible to manage, as I said, the full-time teaching, the one-to-one tutoring, the company, and the rapping. So I quit the school totally. But to honour the existing clients that I had when I made that decision that were still with me, I'm seeing them off until they finish. So I think I dropped from 24 students a week 2 years ago. So last academic year, I think I saw 12. And then this year, I think I've got 6. So I'll see them till they've got their GCSEs. But yeah, they're the effective students I see now, because whenever I make an agreement, I will always honour it to the end. They booked with me, so they'll stay with me. But yeah, I don't take anyone else myself now. Yeah,
but it's really interesting having those conversations with kind of tutoring company leaders about whether they still do sessions themselves, and some do and some don't, and there's obviously pros and cons to both options. But I asked that because I wanted to know about, I've seen before, and we were told by teachers at school, sing your notes, record yourself singing your notes, and then listen back to those when you go to sleep at night, that kind of thing. Do you tell your students, and do you tell your tutors at JGM, science tutors, to tell their students to include singing and rapping in revision, that kind of thing? Do you feel it helps, that kind of memory?
So I feel it helps, but I've got some really key principles of how I run JGM. The number one thing for how we do things is the scrutiny and the hiring process, the recruiting process of who we take in. We make sure we only take in the very best, but then to pay respect to that, we don't monitor or insist on anything for tutors. If tutors join us, they've got our systems and our 24-hour support should they need it. But we don't insist on any methods. We give them the whiteboard links. We introduce and get everything set up as prepared as best as possible. But the methods that they use, I want to leave them to it, because in my eyes, if I'm working for an agency myself, I don't really want to have, you're with us, but you need to do this in this way, and that in this way, and that in this way. It compromises my creativity and my enjoyment of it. So with tutors working with JGM, you're with us because you're great. I know you're great. And I know you'll teach great lessons because of the way that you want to do it. If I was doing a lesson, I might want to put a rap in there. If someone above me said, "Oh no, that's not the way we do it," well, that is going to put my students at detriment, if that makes sense. Another teacher might hate that rapping thing, and it might be bad for their students, but for me, it'd be good for mine. If I could pick any 10 tutors at random, I might do something that would be great for my students because I'm passionate and I like doing it and delivering it that way. If I think, this is great, you have to do it that way, they might hate that, and therefore it will come out, they won't want to do it. So it's just about everyone's got their own unique ways of doing things, and they do it in that way. And then the passion comes out, and lessons work well. And that's how I've run things for 5 years. And our reviews stay at 5 stars, and our bookings only go up. So that's what I choose to see as my evidence of that strategy working. So I keep it that way. And another thing, our turnover is very low. So we usually, tutors join us, they tend not to leave. And for me, that's, I think, is part of it. As I said, I've worked for many schools, I've worked for agencies before. And usually the thing, apart from marking, which is horrific, it's sort of admin and overarching things that you have to do that are fairly pointless. So I try to limit that.
Yeah, well, that's the sort of holy grail of running an agency, isn't it? Is reducing that churn rate and being able to, keep your kind of tutors loyal to your agency and your work, that kind of thing. I mean, I wanted as well to speak a little bit about, and you've spoken earlier on about obviously the specialism in science that you have and that your agency has. But one thing I've seen you talk about before, and which maybe isn't something that comes out through the rapping, but it's something that comes out through just kind of the post you do and the voice that you have. But one of your missions, it seems, is to create more scientific, minds in this country. And I wondered if you could maybe give an insight into how you feel we might be able to do that as tutors, because given that our listeners today are mainly consist of tutors and private educators, how do you think we can create more great scientific minds?
It's going to be about a culture change of science not being viewed as a nerdy or boring subject, and the way it's taught. There are certain things in the curriculum that are quite boring, and it's all about changing that. People can see what tech brings. If you look at phones, you look at all sorts of things around us that couldn't exist without the science that underpins it. And I think more of that should be brought into class, into schools, into culture, so people don't see it as a nerdy and boring subject, and that they want to learn more about it and the possible jobs that it brings. But most people sort of see it as science, engineering, or biotech, and that's not for me. And for me, my passion in science lies in the possibilities it has. I love sci-fi films. I love the idea of new tech making humanity better. Cures for diseases, things that make our lifestyle easier. And these things can only exist when there are minds that can come up with these things. If science was just suddenly put down and maths and English were favoured in top, we might get people that can read and write better. But everything is pretty much going to plateau and get better very, very slowly. Whereas if we've got great minds, scientific minds, we might not all have to work in 100 years, and people might not die of cancer, and that's a real possibility. But if science continues plodding along, it takes longer. We'll get to there one day, but it'll just take longer.
Yeah, I mean, I'm sure you could have a little battle there with maths and English tutors on that one. But
yeah, you would. To me, I think I'm English and maths' biggest supporter. Even when parents call me, I'll always say the truth. I'll say maths and English, they come first, and they do come first, because there is absolutely no point in being a science acer, which would be pretty difficult if your English and maths were terrible. But there'd be no point in excelling in science just verbally if you knew it very well. When you've got to come and explain this to someone, your new scientific finding, and you can't communicate that idea, that's useless. If you're trying to evaluate whether things work well by looking at the numbers, but you don't get the numbers, again, that's going to be pretty useless. And if you've got to come out of school and function in society and do well, you need to read, write, speak, and know numbers perfectly. So to me, science is always third. But it is third. There's nothing wrong with it. It's a definite third.
The wonderful tutor in our community called Andrea Gadsby, who did a talk at a recent festival of ours about literacy across the curriculum, like all tutors being tutors of English, which is one part, and the other part really is that maths is sort of the language of physics, at least, if not also biology and chemistry, an understanding of probability for biology, that kind of thing. So yeah, I mean those two are certainly hugely important, but I'm not going to sit here and disagree that science is third, especially as there's a lot of tutors in our community for whom STEM is their specialism. So I don't want to alienate our listenership. And now a brief word from last week's guest, Arthur Moore, whose episode you can catch after this.
From being on the Qualified Tutor podcast, I learned that it's really important to take some time to reflect upon our own schooling and the impact that's had upon us as educators. I really enjoyed being a guest on the pod, as it allowed me to be on the other side of the microphone or the Zoom call from running my own podcast and see how other people run their pods. I've certainly got a load of ideas now from Ludo. To any future guests, I'd say just do it. Don't worry about living up to the heights of episode 133. Just go and be who you are and talk about your experiences. I bet there's so much we can learn from the conversation you'll have.
Matt, thank you so much for coming on here. We're just kind of drawing into an end. I've got one more avenue I want to explore, but you're speaking as someone who is an inspiration for both a kind of branding exercise for tutors and small tutoring businesses, a science expert as well, someone who's been there and done that for a long, long time. And whether tutors of ours or tutors in our community are catching your videos on TikTok or not, I think the way that you package and release content is incredibly effective and something that lots of our tutors could and perhaps should aspire to. So I'm really glad that you've come on, Matt, to talk about that.
Thank you.
But one question I keep thinking, and which I'm going to just get in at the end here, is about what's next for you, Matt, because you're clearly someone with bright ideas, and you're clearly someone who's built a very solid platform already. So what's next for Matt Green?
We're going to continue with the company. The company is growing at a rate, and we're going to keep that going. But number one is keeping the quality high for students. So we're always trying to make lessons better for students as best we can, and always trying to make the services as best for tutors as we can. I always consider myself as a business that serves two people, parents and families, as well as the tutors. I don't want anyone to join us and not feel that they're provided with a job that's anything but rewarding. So that's the company side. We're trying to double and triple in the next 12 months. Rapping wise, I've got a few things coming up, two of which I'm not yet allowed to speak about, but you might be seeing me on TV fairly soon, on maybe one show, possibly two.
The one show or on one show?
on one or two shows, not the one show. Maybe the one show will call me. I don't know. But
You're sitting on the sofa there.
So I've got a couple TV shows that are potentially on the cards. And TikTok and Spotify. That's another thing. All the songs that I put on TikTok and YouTube, I've had an outrageous demand on DMs and comments. Can you put them on Spotify? So I'm taking my library and I'm basically licensing and buying beats that I own outright. And then I'm going to be re-putting all my songs onto owned music. So it'll all be mine. It will all be on Spotify and it can all be streamed on those platforms, because the number one thing students want to be able to do is not just necessarily watch it on TikTok. They got their exam. They just download Matt Green's Science album, headphones in on the bus on the way to school, and they're just listening to it. So that is something that's going to be happening very soon. I've got 2 songs out already, but the rest will be following.
That is so cool, Matt. The idea of being able to just constantly being that revision guide for students is absolutely awesome. Plus, making it obviously something fun and interesting, like listening to music. Listeners, your next step is obviously, now he's said that, to go to Spotify or YouTube if you don't have Spotify and have a listen to those songs, download those songs. Of course, if you have TikTok, or if you have a child or a niece or a nephew who has TikTok, then at mattgreen.jgm is the TikTok. You just type in Matt Green to TikTok as well. And for those who don't dabble in TikTok, don't really know what it is, don't even know how to get into it, you can always find Matt on LinkedIn. Just type in Matt Green. But Matt, if listeners want to get in touch with you right after this directly, what's the best way that they can do that?
The best way is to just send me an email. If you can't message me on any of those platforms, where I'm pretty much mattgreen.jgm on all platforms, you can just send me an email directly at matt@jgmtutors.com. And I reply fairly quickly.
Awesome. Matt, thank you so much for coming on. That was really a great conversation and great to get to know you a little better. And I'm sure this won't be the first or the only time that you speak to our audience. So thank you.
Great stuff. Thanks, Leo.
Okay. Cheerio then. And we'll see all your listeners next time. Bye.
Bye-bye. Bye-bye.
Thank you for listening to this episode of the Qualified Tutor Podcast. Whether you're a regular listener of this podcast or you've just stumbled across it, join the Qualified Tutor Podcast group within the Qualified Tutor community to stay up to date with our latest news, offers, workshops, and of course, simply to meet other tutors like you. Whatever your level as a tutor, our training courses will be the next step in your professional development. Visit qualifiedtutor.org/training to find out more about our CPD accredited and Ofqual recognised courses, the first of their kind in the tutoring industry. Your student deserves the best tutor possible. Make that happen today by joining Qualified Tutor